The stars burned cold and distant in the outer reaches of the Sagittarius Arm. Fleet Commander Stor stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Mighty Fang, his 4 eyes scanning the holographic display with satisfaction. 3,000 years the Crithian Empire had ruled the known galaxy, and every single species they encountered had learned the same lesson. Resistance was futile. Surrender was inevitable. The Empire always won. Today would be no different. His sensor officer had detected an unknown vessel drifting through space, clearly primitive, probably lost. It was small, barely the size of a Crithian courier ship. The hull was covered in strange angular plates and odd protrusions that made no aesthetic sense whatsoever. Stor had seen 1,000 alien designs, and this one looked like someone had assembled scrap metal in the dark. Open communications, he ordered. His translator device began working immediately. Unknown vessel, this is Fleet Commander Stor of the Crithian Empire. You have entered Imperial space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your immediate destruction. The message repeated 3 times in the universal frequencies. Stor waited. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency. Weapons were already charged, ready to deliver a warning shot. It was standard protocol. Fire across their bow, watch them panic, then bring them in for processing. Simple, clean, effective. A response crackled through the speakers, translated by the AI systems. This is the UHSS Indomitable Spirit, Earth exploration vessel. We are on a peaceful mission of discovery. We mean no harm and claim no territory. We request peaceful dialogue. Stor clicked his mandibles in amusement. Earth, he had never heard of it. Another insignificant speck in the galaxy about to learn its place. He gestured to his weapons officer. Fire warning shots. Standard intimidation pattern. 3 energy beams lanced across space, brilliant purple streaks that passed within 50 meters of the human vessel. They were low-powered, barely enough to damage a shuttle, but they always did the job. Every species understood violence. Aboard the Indomitable Spirit, First Officer Marcus Chen stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 3 weapons impacts, unprovoked, hostile action. Captain, they just fired on us, his tactical officer reported, voice tight with controlled anger. Marcus took a deep breath. The Indomitable Spirit was an exploration vessel, yes, but like every human ship that left Sol system, it was built for war. Humanity had learned long ago that hope for the best, prepare for the worst was more than a saying. It was survival, shields up, defensive posture. Send another message. Tell them we are not hostile, but we will defend ourselves if attacked again. The message transmitted. Marcus watched the alien ships on his screen. 7 of them, each one massive, easily 3 times the size of his vessel. The Indomitable Spirit was outgunned, outmassed, and outnumbered, but it was not helpless. On the Mighty Fang, Stor received the human response with growing irritation. They dared to threaten the Empire? This primitive species in their ugly little ship thought they could negotiate. Increase power. Light bombardment. Disable their engines. Bring them in. His weapons officer adjusted the controls. This time, 12 energy beams converged on the human ship. Enough firepower to cripple a destroyer. The beam struck, and something impossible happened. The human ship's shields flared bright blue, absorbing the energy. The light show was spectacular, beautiful even. Cascading waves of electromagnetic force dispersing the attack. But when the light faded, the human ship was still there. Intact. Undamaged. Not even drifting. Commander, their shields held, the sensor officer reported. Confusion evident in his voice. No damage, no power fluctuation. The energy was completely absorbed. Stor felt a tremor of uncertainty. That was not possible. No ship that small could mount generators powerful enough to absorb a full bombardment. Unless, scan their power systems, he ordered. The sensor officer worked his console, then froze. Commander, I am detecting a power signature I do not recognize. The energy output is enormous, far beyond what their size should allow. Aboard the Indomitable Spirit, Marcus made his decision. They had tried peace. They had tried warnings. These aliens had fired on a peaceful vessel twice. Earth fleet regulations were clear. Defend yourself. Defend your crew. Never fire first, but always fire last. Tactical, target their weapons arrays. Disable only. Use railguns minimum velocity. Fire when ready. The Indomitable Spirit's hull opened in 6 places. Magnetic accelerators, Each one 30 meters long, hummed to life. Tungsten rounds, each weighing 50 kilograms, loaded into firing position. The targeting computers calculated trajectory, velocity, impact points. The weapons were simple, ancient even by human standards. Chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds. No energy signatures, no fancy technology, just mass and velocity. Physics did the rest. 6 rounds fired in half a second. They crossed the distance between ships in less time than it took to blink. The Crithian sensors never saw them coming. Energy-based detection systems could not track. Unpowered projectiles moving at a fraction of light. Speed. The rounds hit. The mighty fang shuddered as something punched through its forward shields like they were not even there. Alarms shrieked. 3 weapon arrays exploded in cascades of sparks and venting atmosphere. A second impact tore through the port side, shearing off an entire sensor cluster. A third and fourth round struck 2 of the escorting destroyers, punching clean through their shield generators and leaving gaping wounds in their hulls. Stor grabbed his command chair as the ship rocked. Damage reports flooded in. 3 destroyers disabled, 1 completely dead in space. His own vessel had lost 40% of its forward weapons, and they had not even seen the attack coming. "What hit us?" he demanded. The sensor officer was frantically reviewing data. I do not know, Commander. There was no energy signature. No particle beam, no plasma. It was solid matter, moving at .003 light speed. Our shields could not stop it because they are designed for energy weapons. Solid matter, Stor repeated slowly. They threw rocks at us? Very fast rocks, Commander. Very precise rocks. Another message came from the human ship. This is First Officer Chen of the UHSS Indomitable Spirit. We have disabled your weapons to protect ourselves. We do not wish further conflict. Stand down immediately or we will be forced to destroy your vessels. You fired first. We responded proportionally. Do not make us respond disproportionately. Stor stared at the small ship on his display. This changed everything. This primitive vessel had just crippled 3 Imperial warships in seconds using weapons his people had abandoned thousands of years ago. Weapons they had dismissed as crude and ineffective. How many more of those weapons do they have? He asked quietly. Unknown, Commander. But if their power generation is as strong as we detected, they could have dozens, maybe hundreds. For the first time in his 300 years of service, Fleet Commander Stor of the Crithian Empire made a decision that would have been unthinkable that morning. He ordered a retreat, all ships fall back. Emergency jump to rally point 7. Now, the Crithian fleet turned and activated their faster-than-light drives, leaving 3 crippled destroyers drifting in space. The human ship made no move to pursue. It simply sat there, shields glowing softly, watching them run. As the mighty fang entered jump space, Stor composed his report. He chose his words carefully, knowing they would reach the Emperor himself. But there was no way to soften the truth. We have encountered a new species. They call themselves humans. They possess defensive technology that renders our weapons ineffective. They possess offensive technology that bypasses our defenses completely. They engage in what appears to be kinetic warfare using relativistic projectiles. They demonstrated both restraint and overwhelming tactical superiority. I respectfully submit that this species represents a credible threat to the Empire and recommend immediate diplomatic contact rather than military action. He sent the message, then sat back in his command chair. 3,000 years of Imperial dominance, 3,000 years of never meeting an equal, and in one afternoon, a species they had never heard of had shattered that illusion with chunks of metal moving really fast. Back aboard the Indomitable Spirit, Marcus was already composing his own report to Earth Command. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline still coursing through his system. First contact achieved. Contact was hostile. Enemy force consisting of 7 large warships engaged us with energy weapons. Our shields held. We responded with minimum necessary force, disabling 3 vessels. Enemy fleet retreated, no casualties on either side, requesting immediate diplomatic and military support. We are not alone in the galaxy, and whoever these people are, they shoot first and ask questions never. He sent the message on the quantum link back to Earth, then looked at his crew. They were staring at him, waiting for orders. Young faces trained for exploration, now blooded in combat against an unknown enemy. We stay here, he said quietly. We watch, we wait. And we hope to God they do not come back with friends. But deep down, Marcus knew they would. Species that shot first did not give up easily, and humanity had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the loudest possible way. With tungsten rounds traveling at 1,000 kilometers per second, the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since Ambassador Chen's speech to the Galactic Council. The galaxy watched and waited, wondering if the humans would keep their promise. Trade between humanity and the Kelvari flourished. Human ships regularly visited Kelvari worlds, bringing technology and taking back exotic goods. The Kelvari were gentle beings, standing about 1.5 meters tall with soft blue fur and large eyes. They valued art, music, and peaceful commerce above all else. On the colony world of Pelshara, Kelvari families worked in vast agricultural fields. The planet was famous for producing a grain that grew nowhere else in the galaxy. 3 major settlements dotted the main continent, each home to about 17,000 Kelvari. The morning sun rose over the eastern settlement of Mirvakel, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Farmer Kelvin stood in his field, checking the ripening crops. His daughter played nearby, singing a traditional Kelvari song about the harvest. It was a perfect morning, peaceful and warm. Then the sky changed. Dark shapes appeared above the atmosphere. They grew larger, descending rapidly. Kelvin's datapad began screaming warnings. His blood went cold as he read the identification codes. Zevrathi warships. 12 of them, inside, now, he shouted to his daughter. They ran toward their home, but they were too late. The first beam struck the center of Mirvakel. The energy weapon was designed for destroying military bunkers, but the Zevrathi aimed it at civilian buildings. The settlement's central plaza vanished in a flash of white light. The shockwave followed seconds later, knocking Kelvan and his daughter to the ground. All across Pelshara, the same horror unfolded. The Zevrathi systematically destroyed all 3 settlements. They took their time, making sure their weapons caused maximum damage. They wanted everyone in the galaxy to see this. They broadcast the attack on open channels, ensuring every species with a receiver could watch. Within 2 hours, it was over. 50,000 Kelvari civilians were dead. The settlements were smoking craters. The Zevrathi ships hung in orbit for another hour, as if daring anyone to respond. Then they transmitted a message to the human embassy on Nexus Station. We have disciplined your allies for their disrespect. They chose the wrong friends. What will the mighty humans do about it? The message was signed by High Commander Thralzek himself. The response from Earth came 18 hours later. It was brief. Only one sentence transmitted directly to the Zevrathi homeworld and broadcast across every major communication channel in the galaxy. Evacuate your frontier worlds. You have 72 hours, that was all. No threats. No demands. No explanation. Just a simple warning. The Zevrathi High Council met in emergency session. Some members argued for caution. The humans had warned them after all, but Thralzek convinced them otherwise. They are bluffing, he insisted. Look at the numbers. We have 3,000 warships. They have 300. We have controlled 40 systems for 1,000 years. They have 20 systems they have held for 2 centuries. This is psychological warfare. They want us to fear them, but there is nothing to fear. The Council agreed. Instead of evacuating, they mobilized their fleet. Every available warship was called to active duty. They positioned forces around their most important worlds. If the humans wanted war, the Zevrathi would give them one they would never forget. Meanwhile, human ships arrived at Pelshara. They were not warships, but medical vessels and transport carriers. Human doctors and rescue workers descended to the shattered settlements. They searched through rubble for survivors. They found Kelvan and his daughter in their collapsed home. Both were badly injured but alive. A human medic, a woman named Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, treated them herself. You are safe now, she said softly in perfect Kelvari. We will take care of you. But the Zevrathi, Kelvan whispered. They are too strong. Humanity cannot fight them. Dr. Okonkwo's face hardened. You let us worry about the Zevrathi. You just focus on healing. Every survivor was evacuated within 36 hours. Human ships carried them to safer Kelvari worlds. Medical teams worked around the clock. Not a single injured Kelvari was left behind. On Nexus Station, the Galactic Council held another emergency session. Species from across the galaxy demanded to know what humanity would do. Many feared a war that could spread across multiple sectors. Others hoped the humans would back down and avoid bloodshed. Ambassador Chen stood before them again. She looked tired. Dark circles showed under her eyes, but her voice was steady. The Zevrathi have killed 50,000 innocent civilians. They did this to mock us, to test us, to see if our words meant anything. She paused. In 48 hours they will have their answer. Ambassador, please reconsider, the Salvaran delegate pleaded. War on this scale could destabilize the entire region. Surely there is a diplomatic solution. There was a diplomatic solution, Chen replied. We offered it 6 months ago. We told everyone the rules. The Zevrathi chose to break them. Now they pay the price. Thralzek himself was present this time, attending via hologram. You are truly going through with this madness? Your little fleet against the might of the Zevrathi Empire? Yes, Chen said simply. Then you will be destroyed. Your species will learn a hard lesson about challenging your betters. Chen looked at him for a long moment. Commander Thralzek, in the 72 hours we gave you, did you evacuate any of your frontier worlds? Of course not. We do not run from threats, like then the blood is on your hands, not ours. We gave you a chance. We always give one chance. She looked around the council chamber. To everyone watching, remember this moment. Remember that humanity offered peace. Remember that we warned them. What happens next is not because we wanted war. It is because we will not tolerate those who murder innocents and mock justice. She ended the transmission. The galaxy held its breath. Betting markets opened on various worlds, with most odds favoring a Zevrathi victory. Some species began moving assets away from the conflict zone. Others prepared to offer aid to whoever needed it after the battle. In human space, something was happening. Ships were moving, though few could track them. Humanity's stealth technology was better than most species realized. Resources were being positioned. Codes were being transmitted. Military personnel were saying goodbye to their families. On Earth, in the Military Command Center, Fleet Admiral Marcus Cole reviewed the battle plan one final time. His staff worked around him with quiet efficiency. All assets in position? He asked. Yes, sir, his second-in-command confirmed. Waiting for your order. Cole looked at the clock. 23 hours until the deadline. He thought about the Kelvari families torn apart by Zevrathi weapons. He thought about the children who would never see their parents again. He thought about the message humanity needed to send. Then we wait, he said. We gave them 72 hours. We will honor that. But the moment the deadline passes, we show them what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. Across the galaxy, the 72 hours ticked down second by second, bringing the galaxy closer to a day it would never forget. Then we will know the true measure of our enemy, the Emperor said quietly, and we will respond accordingly. Grand Admiral, you have your orders. Assemble the punishment fleet. Find the humans. Bring me their surrender, or bring me their ashes. I do not care which, the Admiral bowed deeply. It will be done, Your Majesty. As the council filed out, Talara remained behind. The Emperor noticed and gestured for her to approach. You disapprove, he stated. I fear we are making a mistake, Your Majesty. We know nothing about these humans, nothing about their true capabilities, nothing about their numbers or their weapons. We are attacking out of pride, not strategy. The Emperor stood and walked to the great window overlooking the capital city. Below, billions of Krithians lived their lives, secure in the knowledge that the Empire protected them, that the Empire was invincible. For 3,000 years we have expanded, he said softly. Every species we encountered bowed to our strength. Some fought, all lost. The Empire stands because we never show weakness. If we appear uncertain now, if we hesitate, our subjects will question our power. Our enemies will see opportunity. No, Talara. We must respond with overwhelming force. We must prove that the Empire is still supreme. And if we are wrong, if these humans are stronger than we believe, then we will adapt, as we always have. But I will not show fear to an unknown species based on one encounter. The punishment fleet will succeed. It must. Talara bowed and left, her hearts heavy with foreboding. She had served the Empire for 200 years. Seen dozens of wars and negotiated countless treaties. Her instincts, honed over centuries, were screaming that this was different. The humans were different, but the Empire could not hear her warnings over the roar of its own pride. 3 days later, the punishment fleet assembled in orbit above the throne world. 50 warships, the pride of the Imperial Navy. Dreadnoughts, cruisers, destroyers, each one crewed by the finest warriors in Krithian space. Grand Admiral Kixtal stood on the bridge of his flagship. the inevitable conquest, and looked at his armada with satisfaction. This would be a lesson the galaxy would remember. The Crithian Empire did not lose, could not lose, would never lose. Meanwhile, in a secure conference room 3,000 light-years away, Marcus Chen stood before a holographic projection of Earth's military command. Admirals, generals, and civilian leaders filled the virtual space, all of them staring at the recording of the encounter. They watched the Crithian ships fire first. They watched the indomitable spirit's response. They watched the alien fleet retreat, and then they began asking questions. "How many ships did you count in total?" Admiral Sarah Okafor asked. She was the commander of the home fleet, responsible for protecting Earth itself. "7 in the immediate encounter," Marcus replied, "but our long-range scans detected energy signatures consistent with at least 36 more vessels within a few light-years. This was a patrol group, not a full fleet. We estimate they have hundreds of ships, possibly thousands. And their technology level? Advanced in some ways, primitive in others. Their energy weapons are sophisticated, probably more efficient than ours, but their shields are useless against kinetic weapons. They rely entirely on energy-based offense and defense. It is like they never considered that someone might just throw a really fast rock at them." A ripple of grim amusement ran through the virtual chamber. Humanity had spent 3 centuries perfecting kinetic warfare. It was cheap, effective, and required no exotic materials. A chunk of tungsten was a chunk of tungsten. Add enough velocity and it became a weapon that could crack planets. "Do you believe they will retaliate?" the Secretary General asked. Marcus nodded grimly. "Without question. They attacked us without provocation. When we defended ourselves, they ran. But species that act like that do not give up. They will come back, probably with many more ships, and they will be looking for our homeworld. Then we need to be ready," Admiral Okafor said. "I recommend we mobilize the home fleet, full deployment, and we activate the Porcupine Protocol in all colonial systems." The chamber fell quiet. The Porcupine Protocol was humanity's insurance policy. Every colony, every mining operation, every orbital station was surrounded by hidden weapon platforms. Thousands of autonomous drones, each carrying a single tungsten rod and basic AI targeting. They were cheap to build, easy to hide, and devastating in swarms. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity named its defense doctrine after a small Earth animal covered in spines. "Approved," the Secretary General said. "Admiral Okafor, you have full authority. Prepare our defenses, and pray we do not need them." But as the meeting ended and the holograms faded, everyone in that virtual room knew the same truth. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for 300 years. Not preparing to meet aliens, preparing to fight aliens, because humanity had studied its own history and learned one terrible lesson. When 2 species meet for the first time, the meeting rarely ends well. Someone always wants what the other has. Someone always shoots first. Humanity had decided long ago that they would never be the ones who shot first. But they would absolutely, without question, be the ones who shot last. The Crithian Empire was about to discover that there was something far more dangerous than a species that loved war. A species that hated war but was very, very good at it anyway. The mining colony of New Edinburgh orbited a dim red dwarf in what the colonists called the Scottish sector. 3,000 people called it home, working the rich asteroid fields that surrounded the system. They mined rare metals, built ship components, and lived quiet lives far from Earth. It was peaceful, remote, safe, until the Crithian punishment fleet arrived. 50 Imperial warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Grand Admiral Kixtal studied the scans with satisfaction. A small colony, minimal defenses visible, a few cargo haulers, some basic infrastructure. This would be simple. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let us offer them the chance to surrender." The message transmitted across all frequencies. "Human colony, this is Grand Admiral Kixtal of the Crithian Imperial Fleet. You are in violation of Imperial space. Surrender immediately and you will be granted clemency. Resist and you will be destroyed. You have 1 standard hour to comply." On the mining station, Colony Director James McLeod stared at the sensor display with growing horror. 50 ships. 50 massive warships, each one bristling with weapons. His little colony had exactly 4 armed patrol boats, designed to deal with pirates, not a full military fleet. "Get everyone to the shelters," he ordered, "and activate the Porcupine Protocol." His deputy stared at him. "Sir, we have miners scattered across a dozen asteroids. It will take hours to evacuate everyone. Then we buy them those hours. Activate the damn protocol." Now, deep in the asteroid field, buried in hollowed-out rocks that looked like any other space debris, thousands of autonomous defense platforms came online. Their basic AI systems analyzed the situation. Hostile fleet, colonial emergency, Porcupine Protocol active. Engage. Grand Admiral Kixtal waited the hour. No response came from the colony. Very well. They had chosen their fate. He gestured to his weapons officer. "Target the main station. Disable their power systems. We want prisoners for interrogation." The inevitable conquest's main batteries charged. Energy built, ready to lance across space and cripple the human station. The weapons officer began the firing sequence. And then something impossible happened. The asteroids moved, not all of them, just a few dozen. Small objects, no bigger than shuttles, separating from the rocks and accelerating toward the fleet. The sensors barely registered them. Small mass, low energy signature, probably escape pods or cargo containers. Irrelevant, except they kept coming. And then more launched. And more. Within 30 seconds, 200 small objects were burning toward the fleet on chemical thrusters. Within a minute, 500. Within 2 minutes, over 1,000, Admiral. "We are detecting multiple launch signatures from the asteroid field," the sensor officer reported, confusion in his voice. "Thousands of small objects. They appear to be autonomous drones." "Drones?" Kixtal repeated. "Activate point defense systems. Sweep them from space." The fleet's automated defenses came online. Energy weapons designed to intercept missiles and torpedoes swiveled toward the incoming swarm. They began firing, and drones started dying. Each shot destroyed one, sometimes two drones. The weapons were efficient, deadly accurate. But there were thousands of drones, and more kept launching. Each drone was simple: a chemical rocket engine, basic navigation, a single tungsten rod, and orders that were beautifully straightforward. Find enemy ship, ram enemy ship, detonate if intercepted. The Crithian point defense systems were good. They destroyed hundreds of drones. But you cannot shoot what you cannot target fast enough, and the drones were cheap, numerous, and expendable. For every 10 destroyed, one got through. The first impacts were almost gentle. Small explosions across the hulls of the Imperial ships. Nothing that could penetrate armor. Nothing that could breach shields. Except the drones were not trying to penetrate. They were trying to overwhelm. A dozen drones hit the destroyer Pride of Krithia. Another 20 struck the cruiser Glorious Victory. The point defense batteries tried to adjust, tried to target the incoming swarm, but there were too many. The fleet's sophisticated targeting systems, designed to track a few dozen incoming missiles, could not handle 3,000 simultaneous targets. "Admiral, we are losing point defense emplacements," the tactical officer shouted. "The drones are specifically targeting our defensive weapons." Kixtal felt the first stirring of genuine fear. They are drones. Simple machines. How are they coordinating? Basic networked AI, sir. They are sharing targeting data. When one identifies a vulnerability, they all know about it. And then the real weapons arrived. Mixed in with the swarm of small drones were larger platforms. These carried the same tungsten rods that had crippled Sexthor's fleet, but with more powerful magnetic accelerators. They waited until the point defenses were overwhelmed, until the Crithian ships were blind and desperate, and then they fired. 50 tungsten rods, each one weighing 200 kilograms, launched at .005 light speed. Admiral Sarah Okafor stood in the command center of the UHSS Washington, Earth's flagship and the pride of the home fleet. Around her, 200 warships hung in formation, a defensive wall between Earth and whatever might come from the stars. For 300 years, humanity had prepared for this moment. The moment when someone else found them. The moment when words failed and weapons spoke. That moment had arrived. New Edinburgh's report had been clear. The Crithians had found a human colony and attacked it. They had been driven off, but they would be back. The only question was when and where. Admiral Okafor did not intend to wait for them to answer that question. She was taking the war to them. The plan was simple and brutal. 3 strike groups, each consisting of 20 warships and supply vessels, would penetrate deep into Krithian space. They would not target military installations. They would not attack civilian populations. Instead, they would go after industrial infrastructure, shipyards, manufacturing centers, the capacity to wage war, and they would do it all at once, synchronized to the second, so the Empire would not know which way to look first. It was a strategy humanity had learned from its own bloody history. You do not fight a war of conquest. You fight a war of attrition. Make the enemy's victories cost more than they can afford. Make their defeats catastrophic. Make them decide that peace is cheaper than war. But there was another element to the plan, one that made Sarah's stomach twist with a mix of pride and dread. Psychological warfare. For decades, Earth's intelligence services had been monitoring radio transmissions from the Krithian Empire. They had learned the language, studied the culture, understood their fears and their pride, and now humanity was going to use that knowledge. "Captain Zhang," she said, addressing the commander of Strike Group Alpha. "Your target?" "The Varick shipyards," Captain Wei Zhang replied. "Orbital construction facilities above their secondary industrial world. Intelligence suggests they produce approximately 30% of the Empire's military vessels. We jump in, disable the yards, broadcast our message, and jump out. 12 minutes on target. Captain Rodriguez, Strike Group Beta, the Thax Manufacturing Complex. Ground-based facilities. We will use precision kinetic strikes to destroy production centers while minimizing civilian casualties. Estimated time on target, 15 minutes. And Captain Okonkwo, Strike Group Gamma, the Hicks mining operations in the Talon Belt. Resource extraction for their war machine. We destroy the infrastructure, leave the miners alive, and make sure they understand exactly why this happened." Sarah nodded. Each captain understood their mission. Each crew was trained and ready. But she needed to make one thing absolutely clear. Listen to me, all of you. We are not butchers. We are not conquerors. Every target has been chosen to minimize loss of life while maximizing strategic impact. You will disable, not destroy when possible. You will warn civilians before firing. You will give them time to evacuate. But you will complete your missions. The Empire needs to learn that attacking humanity carries a price they cannot afford. Questions none came. These were professionals. They knew what was at stake. Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. 60 human warships vanished from Sol system. They're faster than light drives, bending space itself. They traveled through dimensions the Krithians barely understood, using navigation systems that humanity had spent 2 centuries perfecting. And they arrived at their targets within seconds of each other, despite being hundreds of light years apart. At the Varick shipyards, Captain Zhang's strike group appeared out of nowhere. Alarms immediately shrieked across the station. Krithian defense platforms began powering up weapons. But before they could fire, every Krithian communication frequency was flooded with a broadcast. The message was in perfect Krithian, delivered with flawless pronunciation. "People of the Krithian Empire, we are humanity. For 80 years we have watched you from afar. We know your language. We know your culture. We know where you live, how you build your ships, and what you value. We did not seek this war. You attacked our people. You killed our explorers. You came to our homes with violence. Now we have come to yours. This is your only warning. Leave humanity alone, or we will dismantle your empire piece by piece." Then the human ships opened fire. Tungsten rods lanced through space, each one targeted with surgical precision. Defense platforms exploded. Construction arms snapped. Docking bays collapsed into vacuum. But the residential sections of the station remained untouched. The civilian ships trying to evacuate were ignored. Only the military and industrial infrastructure was destroyed. In 12 minutes, 30% of the Empire's shipbuilding capacity ceased to exist. At the Thax Manufacturing Complex, Captain Rodriguez's group performed a similar operation. They broadcast their warning, gave the workers 10 minutes to evacuate the factories, and then reduced the buildings to rubble with precisely placed kinetic strikes. Not a single civilian died, but the manufacturing capacity of an entire world was crippled. 6 months had passed since the Treaty of Neutral Station. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Krithian Empire, which had ruled unchallenged for 3,000 years, was no longer an empire. It was now the Crithian Federation, a voluntary alliance of worlds rather than a collection of conquered territories. The change had not come easily. When news of the peace treaty spread through imperial space, something unexpected happened. The subject species, the conquered peoples who had spent centuries under Crithian rule, saw an opportunity. If the mighty empire could be humbled by a species they had never heard of, if the Crithians could be forced to negotiate rather than dominate, then perhaps freedom was possible. The Velkar were the first to demand autonomy, a reptilian species that had been conquered 500 years earlier. They cited humanity's example. If humans could force the empire to the negotiating table, they argued, then clearly the old order was ending. They wanted representation. They wanted self-determination. They wanted to be partners, not subjects. Emperor Kha'Zix faced a choice. He could crush the rebellion with force as his ancestors would have done, or he could adapt as the humans had taught him. To his council's surprise, he chose adaptation. The Velkar were granted autonomy within a new federal system, and once that door opened, dozens of other species followed. It was painful. The old guard resisted. Some military leaders attempted coups. There were protests, riots, and brief conflicts, but Ambassador Talara worked tirelessly, using humanity's example as leverage. The humans, she argued, had shown that strength did not require domination. They had defeated imperial forces without conquering a single world. They had demanded peace, not submission. If the empire wanted to survive in this new era, it needed to learn from that example. Slowly, painfully, the empire transformed. The Eternal Throne became a symbol rather than an absolute authority. The War Council became a senate, with representatives from dozens of species. Emperor Kha'Zix, to his credit, embraced the changes. He understood that the alternative was watching his civilization crumble as more and more worlds broke away. And humanity, watching from afar, quietly approved. They had not set out to topple an empire, but by refusing to be conquered, by demonstrating that different paths were possible, they had sparked a revolution, not through violence or invasion, but through example. On the orbital station Crossroads, which had become the new center of human and Crithian cooperation, Admiral Sarah Okafor met with Fleet Commander Stor. The Crithian officer who had first encountered humanity now commanded joint patrol operations in the neutral zone between their territories. It was strange, working with a former enemy. But both officers were professionals, and professionalism bred respect. "I have a question," Stor said as they reviewed patrol schedules in the station's command center. "One that has troubled me since our first encounter." "Ask," Sarah replied. "Your ships, your weapons, your entire military doctrine, all of it designed for warfare. Yet you went 300 years without a single major conflict among your own people. How is that possible? How does a species that understands war so well manage to avoid it?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Because we remember what war costs. Our history is filled with conflicts that achieved nothing except death and suffering. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times, and when we finally stopped fighting each other, we made a collective decision. Never again. Never forget what we are capable of, but never use it against ourselves. But you built weapons anyway, because we are not naive. Peace is a choice, but not everyone chooses it. We hoped we would never meet another species. But if we did, we wanted to be ready. So we built our fleets. We trained our soldiers. We prepared for the worst while praying for the best." Stor clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "And what would you have done if you had arrived in the galaxy and found it peaceful? If every species you met greeted you with friendship?" Sarah smiled. "Then we would have had 200 very expensive science vessels and a lot of explaining to do to our taxpayers. But better to have weapons and not need them than to need them and not have them. Your empire taught us we were right to prepare." Stor nodded slowly. "We were arrogant. We believed our own mythology. 3,000 years of conquest made us think we were invincible. You shattered that illusion in minutes. And in doing so, you freed not just yourselves but dozens of species we had subjugated. The Velkar speak of you as liberators. The Fex call you the breakers of chains. You have become legends without trying. We did not want to be legends. We wanted to be left alone. Perhaps. But the galaxy will not leave you alone now. Other species have heard of you. Some fear you. Some want to ally with you. Some want to test themselves against you. You have announced your presence, Admiral. The question is, what will you do with that presence? Sarah considered that. It was a fair question. Humanity had wanted isolation, but isolation was no longer possible. The galaxy knew they existed. Other species were reaching out, asking questions, requesting contact. Earth's leaders were divided on how to respond. Some argued for maintaining distance. Others wanted full engagement with galactic politics. We will be what we have always been, she said finally. Cautious, prepared, willing to talk, but ready to fight. We will not seek conquest or expansion, but we will defend our interests and our allies. And if that means taking a more active role in galactic affairs, then so be it. But on our terms. Always on our terms. Stor extended his hand in the human gesture he had learned. Then I look forward to seeing what humanity does next. You have already changed the galaxy once. I suspect you will do so again. Sarah shook his hand. Let us hope the next changes are peaceful ones. Across the galaxy, in a small bar on the mining station New Edinburgh, James McLeod raised a glass with a group of visiting Crithian engineers. They had come to study human defensive systems and in the process had become friends. It was strange, sharing drinks with people whose fleet had tried to destroy his home 6 months earlier. But that was the nature of peace. Yesterday's enemies could become today's colleagues if both sides were willing to try. One of the engineers, a young female named Sixera, asked the question that had been bothering her since arriving. Director McLeod, your drones. They are so simple. Just a rocket and a rod of metal. Yet they defeated our most advanced warships. How did you know that would work? James smiled. Because we tested them against ourselves. Every weapon system humanity builds is tested against our own defenses. Our shields, our armor, our tactics. We assume that any enemy we face will be as smart as we are, as creative as we are, as dangerous as we are. So we build weapons that can beat us, and then we build defenses against those weapons. And then we build better weapons. It is an endless cycle. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it keeps us alive. Your empire built beautiful ships designed to fight other beautiful ships. We built ugly ships designed to kill anything that threatened us. Neither approach is wrong. But when they met, ugly won because ugly was practical. The Crithian engineers nodded thoughtfully. They were learning lessons that would reshape their entire military doctrine. Efficiency over elegance, function over form, results over aesthetics. On Earth, in the United Nations building, the Secretary General addressed a crowd of reporters from dozens of human worlds and, for the first time, representatives from alien species. The Crithians had sent observers. The Velkar had sent diplomats. Even some of the smaller species that had been freed from imperial rule wanted to establish contact. 6 months ago, the Secretary General said, humanity learned we were not alone. We learned it in the worst possible way, through violence and conflict. But we also learned something else. We learned that the principles we hold dear, the values we fought so hard to establish among ourselves, can be applied on a galactic scale. Self-determination, mutual respect, the right to defend yourself without seeking domination over others. These are not just human values. They are universal values, and we invite any species that shares them to join us in building a better galaxy. The applause was thunderous. Humanity was no longer alone, and the galaxy was better for it. Years later, historians would point to this moment as the beginning of the Galactic Federation, not a conquest, not an empire, but a voluntary alliance of free species, built on principles that humanity had learned through centuries of bitter experience. War was possible. War was sometimes necessary, but peace was always preferable. And peace was only possible when everyone involved had the strength to defend themselves and the wisdom to choose not to. On Crossroads Station, in a quiet observation lounge, Admiral Sarah Okafor and Fleet Commander Stor sat together, watching a joint patrol group pass by. Human ships and Crithian ships flying in formation, protecting the neutral zone. 6 months ago, such a sight would have been impossible. Now it was routine. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked. That first encounter, firing on the indomitable spirit. Stor was quiet for a long time. Every day. If I had shown restraint, if I had waited, if I had tried diplomacy first, none of this would have been necessary. But I was arrogant. I thought you were weak. I thought your small ship and strange technology meant you were primitive. I was wrong, and my people paid the price for my arrogance. But something good came of it. Your empire is now a federation. Dozens of species are free. And our two peoples are allies instead of enemies. Sometimes the worst mistakes lead to the best outcomes, perhaps. But I still wonder, Admiral. What if we had met peacefully? What if my first message had been one of greeting instead of threat? How different would the galaxy be? Sarah smiled. We will never know. But I choose to believe we would have ended up here eventually. Humanity was always going to defend itself. Your empire was always going to expand. Those two facts were incompatible. War was inevitable. But so was peace eventually. We just took the fast route. The fast route cost lives, yes, but fewer than a prolonged conflict would have. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we offered terms before either side was too invested in victory to accept peace. That is the lesson humanity learned from our own wars. End conflicts quickly, before they become generational. Make peace cheaper than war, and never ever fight a war of attrition you cannot win. Stor raised his drink, a human custom he had adopted. To peace, then, and to the unlikely friendship between two species that met in violence but chose to part in cooperation. Sarah raised her own glass. To peace, and to the galaxy we are building together. One where strength is measured not by how many worlds you conquer, but by how many you protect. They drank together, human and Crithian, former enemies now friends, and watched the stars turn slowly outside the viewport. The galaxy was vast and full of unknowns. But for the first time in 3,000 years, the Crithian Federation was at peace. And for the first time in 300 years, humanity was not alone. It was a good beginning. Not perfect, not without cost, but good. And sometimes good was enough. Somewhere in the void between stars, a human exploration ship detected signals from an unknown species. Captain Maria Santos read the translation with a mix of hope and caution. The message was simple. Hello, we come in peace. We wish to talk. She composed her response carefully, knowing that first contact was always delicate. This is Captain Santos of the human exploration vessel Horizon. We receive your greeting with friendship. We welcome peaceful contact and look forward to learning about your people. Please transmit your coordinates and we will arrange a meeting in neutral space. As she sent the message, she glanced at her tactical officer. Weapon status? All systems ready, Captain, but no hostile actions detected. They appear genuinely peaceful. Good, but stay alert. Hope for peace, prepare for war. That is the human way. And as the Horizon moved toward its rendezvous with a new species, humanity carried forward the lesson they had learned from the Crithians. The universe was dangerous. Contact was unpredictable. But with strength, wisdom, and a willingness to extend an open hand while keeping a weapon ready, even the most violent first meeting could lead to lasting peace. The galaxy was learning. And humanity was teaching, not through conquest or dominance, but through example, through showing that it was possible to be both peaceful and powerful, to be both kind and prepared, to want friendship but to demand respect. The Empire had freaked out when they discovered humans. They had thought no one was meant to possess ships like that. But now they understood. Those ships, those weapons, that whole terrifying military doctrine, was not meant for conquest, it was meant for survival. And in a galaxy full of unknowns, survival required strength. Humanity had that strength, and they were finally, carefully ready to share it with the galaxy. The destroyer Pride of Crythia took 3 rounds through its engine section. The ship broke in half, atmosphere venting in a glittering cloud. The cruiser, Glorious Victory, lost its entire command tower, the impact so violent that internal explosions tore through 4 decks. Another destroyer, the Eternal Wrath, simply stopped moving as its reactor was pierced clean through. In less than 5 minutes, the Crithian punishment fleet lost 15 ships. Not disabled, destroyed, hulls breached, crews dead or dying, and the drones kept coming. All ships retreat. Kickstal roared. Emergency jump! Get us out of here! The surviving Imperial vessels turned and fled, activating their faster-than-light drives. The drones did not pursue. They simply hung in space, a glittering swarm of tiny death machines, and waited for the next target. On the mining station, James McLeod watched the Crithian fleet vanish and let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. His hands were shaking. His colony, his 3,000 people, had just survived an attack by 50 warships, because humanity had built a defense system designed on a simple principle. If someone attacks you, make it cost more than they are willing to pay. How many drones did we lose? He asked quietly. Approximately 2,500, his tactical officer replied. We still have 4,000 active platforms remaining. And how much did each drone cost? About 5,000 credits, sir. Basic components, simple AI, cheap rocket fuel. The most expensive part was the tungsten rod, and we mined that locally. James did the math. They had just destroyed 15 warships, each one probably worth billions, using weapons that cost less than a decent ground vehicle. The economics of the situation were almost funny. Almost. Get a message to Earth Command, he said. Tell them the Porcupine Protocol works. Tell them the aliens came back with friends. And tell them those aliens now know exactly where we are. Because that was the terrifying part. The Crithians had found a human colony, which meant they could find more, which meant they could find Earth. And when they came for humanity's homeworld, they would not send 50 ships. They would send everything they had. But James McLeod also knew something the Crithians did not. New Edinburgh was a mining colony, a small remote outpost with 3,000 people and basic defenses, and it had just destroyed 15 warships without losing a single person. Earth had 200 warships. Mars had 150. The Belt had 300 more scattered across 1,000 installations. And every single one of them was surrounded by the same swarms of cheap, simple, devastatingly effective drones that had just torn through the Crithian fleet. The Empire thought humanity was weak because they used primitive weapons. They thought kinetic warfare was crude and unsophisticated. They were about to learn a very old Earth lesson. The simplest weapon, wielded with skill and in sufficient numbers, will always defeat complexity. Aboard what remained of the punishment fleet, Grand Admiral Kickstill sat in his command chair and stared at the casualty reports. 15 ships destroyed, 2,000 crew dead, another 1,000 wounded, and they had not even reached the human colony's main defenses. They had been turned back by automated drones that cost less than a shuttle to build. His communications officer approached hesitantly. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the human colony. Play it." The message was simple, delivered in calm, measured tones. "This is Colony Director James McLeod of New Edinburgh. You attacked our civilians. You attacked our home. We defended ourselves using minimum necessary force. We could have destroyed your entire fleet. We chose not to. Consider this your only warning. Humanity wants peace, but we are prepared for war. And if you force us to fight, you will lose. Every single time, go home. Tell your leaders what happened here. And do not come back." The transmission ended. Kickstill sat in silence for a long moment. Then he composed his report to the Emperor. It was the hardest message he had ever written. The truth could not be avoided. "Your Majesty, the punishment fleet has been defeated. We engaged what we believed to be a minor colonial outpost. We were wrong. The humans possess defensive capabilities that far exceed our intelligence estimates. They can deploy thousands of autonomous weapons platforms at minimal cost. Our ships are vulnerable to their tactics. I recommend immediate cessation of hostilities and diplomatic contact. We cannot win a war of attrition against an enemy who can build 1,000 weapons for the cost of one of ours." He sent the message, knowing it might cost him his command. But Kickstill was a soldier, not a politician, and soldiers understood when they were beaten. The humans had beaten them. With rocks and simple machines and cold, calculating efficiency, the Empire had learned a terrible lesson today. There were worse things than meeting a warlike species. Meeting a species that did not want war but was terrifyingly good at it anyway.